Studies Section 9. Philosophy, Language and National Development. Introduction. Philosophical experience suggests that organizational leadership with an urgent vision for change, ability to manage the change process, and selection of systematic changes capable of fulfilling the vision are each critical for successful quality improvement. Published literature from other industries emphasizes the importance of a goal-directed change process managed by leaders who recognize the need to engage their employees and other leaders in a disciplined but flexible way that accommodates external and internal factors and uses teams and group learning. It also suggests the importance of organizational context and the level of external and internal barriers and facilitators for change. The resulting model proposes that priority, change process, and care process content are necessary for measurable improvements in quality of care and patient outcomes, although internal and external barriers must also be attended to and addressed. This framework may provide a guide to those in the front lines of care who would like to make the care transformations that are needed to greatly improve society. Learning Outcomes for Studies Section 9. When you have studied this section, you should be able to understand what national development is, describe the role of philosophy and language in such a development, why cultural identity is a necessary requirement in national development. National prominence in the Nigerian context. If you were asked what the fundamental problem with Nigeria is, what would your answer be? I suspect most people would think of problems like leadership, followership, lack of infrastructure, bad educational system, corruption, ethnicity, underdevelopment, poverty, injustice, and so many other woes. Let's capture all this as a fundamental problem of national development. Compare with other states in the world, say the United States of America. Nigeria is a state which has not achieved any significant index of national development. In a very deep sense, Nigeria is not a viable society. In the first place, there is a pervasive sense of suspicion and distrust amongst those who call themselves Nigerians. This is revealed, for instance, in the various kinds of ethnic and religious stereotypes that we circulate in the national space. For instance, a Hausa person is naturally dubbed a Mola. A Yoruba person is naturally given to extravagance and Owambe. An Igbo man is naturally cunning and dubious. The other minority ethnic groups do not even enter into consideration here. They just don't exist in the national scheme of things. Another manifestation is the declining and degenerating state of social institutions that are supposed to serve as the regulatory mechanism for social life. This has therefore led to a rampant social disorder and normlessness. Take the education institution, for instance. Education no longer serves the purpose of giving the individual an established ground from which to make sense of his or her life. It is now totally an endeavor channeled towards getting employment for the recipients. Finally, Nigeria is cursed with a leadership that has no conceptual capacity to understand the national predicament and act decisively on it. The consequence of all this is that we live in a society whose foundation is fundamentally faulty. For Professor Ladipo, the critical problem arises from the Nigerian leadership orientation, which predisposes us to constantly battling with superficial national issues at the expense of the fundamental ones. Examples of such national and fundamental issues are presented in the diagram below. 1. Tenure of public office. 2. rotational presidency. 3. Same-sex marriage. 4. Religious identities and its problems. 5. Health of the president. 6. Prostitution. 7. Unemployment. These issues, though important, can't be compared with such other fundamental issues like the following below. Social justice, that is Niger Delta. Social order, an appropriate value system for a developing country. Poverty and the issue of wealth creation and distribution. Unity in diversity. Realizing the common good and such other fundamentals, Oladipo 2008, Chapter 5. We can therefore begin to read the trouble with Nigeria as really that of our lack of the foundations for social life, which serve as the basis for a composite, all-round development of any country. What then is national development, and what are the conditions for its achievement? Outline the problem of Nigerian leadership. Nigerian leadership has no conceptual capacity to understand national predicament and act decisively on it. Social existence and the foundation of national development. The orthodox template that defines national development is the one which sees it as the capacity a country has to improve the social welfare of its citizens through the provision of basic social amenities like good education, housing, electricity, healthcare facilities, pipe-borne water, and so on. In other words, national development is seen in the narrow sense of the provision of infrastructural facility. This understanding is important to the achievement of national development, but it does not tell the whole story. Infrastructural and economic development in any state is veritable tools that ought to lead to the achievement of certain non-economic objectives. The most significant in this regard is the achievement of human well-being for the citizenry. Human well-being is assessed in terms of the quality of life which an average individual is confronted with in any national space. It is also factored into the extent to which individuals are happy and free to achieve self-realization. Basically, national development is the provision of infrastructural facility. To achieve such an objective, there is the need to put in place certain foundations on which social life in a state can evolve. These foundations refer to those conditions that human beings require to live a conducive life in the society in which they find themselves. These conditions are basically three. A. The adaptation to external human and physical environment. B. Provision of human biosocial needs. And C. The establishment of the requirements necessary for social cooperation. The first condition requires that human beings adjust to whatever physical environment they find themselves in order to ensure their own survival. Such an interaction with the environment would involve the people achieving shelter, clothing, and feeding in, for example, an environment dominated by mountains, that is Iceland, or thick forests, that is the Amazon, or oceans, that is Japan, or sand, that is Saudi Arabia. Apart from this, there is also the complementary need to adjust to the human environment. This requires that the individuals in a particular society be protected through adequate care and support, especially those who are weak and vulnerable like the aged, the sick, and the young ones. The second condition for a conducive social life involves the provisions of such biosocial needs at three levels. The first level includes the need for food, clothing, and housing. The second level includes cultural needs like the need for social and cultural identity, that is, the idea of who are, what we are. The third level of needs include the psychic needs like the need for self-dignity, sexual expression, and so on. Finally, the last condition for social life has to do with the orderly coordination of the affairs of society in such a way as to make social cooperation possible. Conceiving national development in terms of infrastructural development has the tendency to lead to an uncritical acceptance of science and technology, manifesting in rapid industrialization and modernization as the sole index of development. No one can deny the fact that significant development in contemporary life depends to a large extent on the capacity of a society to move forward technologically. However, no one can also deny the fact that social institutions consisting of political institutions, economic institutions, cultural institutions, and kinship institutions help human beings in building and cementing their social life. These institutions, on their part, are held together by certain values which inform their functions. Values refer to the estimated worth of something, the principle or standard which guides a group or an individual, or the ideals which represents the fundamental end or purpose an individual or group pursues. This could include the value of trust, honesty, reciprocity, tolerance, compassion, etc. It should not be difficult for you as a Nigerian to see that these values are lacking in the Nigerian society. It is also not difficult for us to know that the social institutions in Nigeria are collapsing. To be sure, just think of the educational system from the primary to the tertiary level. You also need to think of the attitude of government workers and ordinary citizens like you and me to government work. What happens if you get an employment in the local government? Will you not be joyous? Thus, again, for Oladipo, when we talk of national development, our focus should be on the extent to which the institutions of a given society enhance the capacity of the people as individuals and as a social collective to secure the condition for the persistence of social life. 2008, 82. To adequately measure national development, therefore, attention must be paid to the capacity of any state to provide two fundamental variables, freedom and decency. Freedom refers to the presence of those conditions in the society which enhances an individual's ability to realize their goals in life, as well as the provision of adequate security to enjoy these conditions. When you are living in a society and there are no constraints to your self-realization as an individual or as a group, then we can say you are free. If you consistently find it difficult to become the kind of person you want to be in life because of certain difficulties made possible by the social arrangements in a country, then we can't say you are actually free. This therefore implies that for you to be really free, there must be some level of social efficiency that ensure that certain things can be taken for granted in the society. We should be able to assume that our transportation will work efficiently, that electricity will be available, that ATM machines will not commit electronic robbery, that we can complete our education at the stipulated time, that we can achieve a genuine health care at reasonable cost, that phones will work, and so on. Freedom also entails that there won't be any reason for any individual to depend on others for survival because of economic or political deprivation. For instance, the situation of workers in Nigeria today, even those working in the universities, is that they have been reduced to an existence of perpetual expectations of arrears and loans. In other words, once there are no arrears owed them by the government or loans from cooperative societies, then workers can't really fashion projects for themselves and on their salaries alone. In this sense, we can't really say they are free. They are captives of the economic and political situation of the country. Decency is also another variable for measuring national development. This has to do with the behavior or attitudes of the people in a society which conform with the accepted and acceptable standard of what is right, what is modest, what is civil, what is wholesome, what is dignifying, and what is respectable. It refers to the level to which these values, which enhance social cooperation, are fully entrenched in any society. For instance, imagine you are driving on a lonely road and saw a stranger flagging you at a distance. What is likely to be your reaction? You speed away, of course. Why will you speed away? Well, for one, you don't know the person, and secondly, you don't trust him or her not to be harmful. Thus, the absence of trust in our society is one of the problems that makes social organization of our society inefficient. In this respect, Nigeria is a normless society, a society defined by a lack of acceptable norms or values by which we can direct the way we think and perceive events around us. Cultural identity and national development. The second significant contribution to national development comes from language and the idea of cultural identity. There is a sense in which national development can't even begin until the citizens are able to achieve a sense of social belonging, a confidence in the capacity of the state to satisfy their deepest aspirations for the basic necessities of life. At the beginning of this lecture, we mentioned the fact that a deep sense of doubt and mutual suspicion characterize social relationships in Nigeria. In such a situation, it becomes difficult for the leadership to mobilize the people against any national challenge. One good reason for such mutual distrust is the multilinguistic situation of Nigeria. There are close to 400 ethno-linguistic groups in Nigeria. The first implication of this is that there is no national lingua franca on which the burden of development can be placed. National development in this sense is a function of the capacity a state has to develop one indigenous language around which the necessity of cultural identity can be built. Education becomes an important instrument for fashioning a cultural identity. This is because educating the citizenry in their indigenous languages assists in the eradication of illiteracy, and this achievement enables the citizens to better appreciate the predicament of the state and respond to it. There is therefore the need for a national language policy that will focus Nigerians' search for nationhood. This does not imply that such a national language policy requires the establishment of only one national language. This is not advisable in a plural state like Nigeria. It, however, requires the enrichment of possible national languages in the Nigerian constitutions as the language of administration, commerce, diplomacy, teaching, government, and so on. For instance, each region or zone in Nigeria could adopt an indigenous language as a regional language which the people can identify with. What is national development? National development in this sense is a function of the capacity a state has to develop one indigenous language around which the necessity of cultural identity can be built. The contribution of philosophy and language. The first contribution of philosophy to national development, therefore, comes from its function as a means to self-understanding, the definition or redefinition of who a people and what they can be. The question of how best to organize the human society in such a way that people can live the good life is one of the basic problems of political philosophy. It is also one of the most critical problems that plural societies face today in a world that is becoming more global and more complex. A plural state is any state in which the people are deeply divided along religious, linguistic, ethnic, and cultural lines. Nigeria, for example, is multilinguistic. That is, there are more than 600 languages. Multi-ethnic, that is, there are equally the same number of ethnic groups. And multi-religious, that is, there are at least more than 3 religious affiliations. Thus, one of the important functions of philosophy is how That universal capacity human beings have to philosophize can assist us, first in improving our sense of human solidarity, and second in helping us to craft a social hope that will enhance our sense of living together in spite of our religious, cultural, linguistic, and ethnic differences. Richard Rorty argues that philosophy is a quest not for knowledge as an end in itself, but a knowledge as a means towards greater human happiness, a genuine human capacity which enhances our ability to trust and to cooperate with other people, and in particular to work together so as to improve the future. 1999, 13. This presupposes the existence within the national space of what is called the philosophic spirit. The philosophic spirit refers to the human capacity to critically and reflectively challenge the structure of existence, of knowledge, and of ideas and ideals in order to determine their tenability for coping with life. This spirit therefore ensures that citizens are always ready to examine and challenge the basis of national existence. This is because the philosophic spirit is an orientation which requires that we always ask for the justification of whatever is considered to be valid or right or good. The philosophic spirit will ensure that we no longer pass the responsibility for our failure either as a national or as individuals to God or the devil. The philosophic spirit also ensures that we take the full responsibility for our self-actualization as individuals and as a state. This will help the society in the long run to pay attention to the fundamental issues rather than the superficial ones in the economy, in public administration, in politics, and in culture. And further, the society can also begin from institutions that can serve as adequate guide for organizing the society. What is a plural state? A plural state is any state in which the people are deeply divided along religious, linguistic, ethnic, and cultural lines. This is the end of study section 9. Thanks for listening.